Hi class, I just wanted to reach out to you and tell you how sorry I was about the technical issues that we had earlier today. I don't know what had happened. Hopefully you had an opportunity to look at some of the announcements that I'd sent out to you in regards to the police ride-along forms. They are attached in the announcement section if you're interested in doing that. Last time in class we were talking a little bit about the issues of trust and the importance of having trust with the community that police officers need to have. What I did is I went out and I located some additional information. I had briefly mentioned in class, what does it take to become a police officer in the state of Idaho? I've got a few different links that I'll share with you, a couple different videos that I'll share with you as well. If you have any questions, we can cover them next time in class. Again, I do apologize for not being able to get the Zoom link to connect. Our server in Salt Lake was down, so again, I really truly apologize for missing the course and the opportunity to engage with you today. So one of the first things that we'll be talking about is, what does it take to become a police officer in Idaho? Trust and community and having people in the right positions is really important. A little bit later on, we'll talk a little bit about the importance of internal affairs, what's available in Boise. I'll take you to the main homepage. We'll talk a little bit about some of the resources that are available there for officers to use to try to engage positively with the community in which they're engaged with, because right now getting the buy-in of the community to trust police officers, like I said last time in class, is at an all-time low. So I'm going to click on this very first link here. I did send out this PowerPoint slide to everyone. It is in the announcements section. So please always just watch your announcements. I send out a ton of announcements, including updated PowerPoints for you to be able to review at later times, just in case you were to miss the class or need some additional clarification. So as we get in here, I'm going to go ahead and start. I'm going to just leave it on the long view here so I can see all the PowerPoints as we get started. So I'm going to take us out to this main site here. What does it really truly take to become a police officer here in the state of Idaho? So we're going to go ahead and open this link up. Give me just a second. I'm going to have to get to another browser because it's not going to let me do it. Hang on for just a second. All right. Let me get to another shared screen real quick. Get over here. How to become a police officer is what I'm going to bring up here. All right, so this is the main website for the state and some of the requirements that it takes to become a police officer in Idaho. Some of the highlights, you may want to go through and read some of this information. There's a lot of detail that goes into some of these reports. Currently it's talking about they have fewer than 3,000 cops in the Idaho Police and Sheriff's Department across the state of Idaho. There's different schools that you can link into if you're interested in becoming a police officer. A lot of the times a criminal justice degree will work for you as well if you want to go into that field. So as I was mentioning before, to be an Idaho police officer, some of the requirements are obviously you need to attend post, which is a pretty intense training session, but it's a lot of fun. I've heard a lot of people say that it's really challenging to them because they have to be away from their families for a little while. They are there, they live, eat, sleep, drink with each other for anywhere between 4 and 6 weeks to go through the academy. So when you start talking about, what the requirements are, here it talks a little bit about you have to be at least 21 years of age. As I shared in class last time, I talked a little bit about them not requiring much of a higher education. However, with a degree, you will move through the ranks a lot faster as a police officer. Here it's stating it only requires a high school diploma or GED. So those are some of the things to look at as well when we start thinking about having a well-trained workforce to deliver services that need to happen in the community. No dishonorable discharges from the military. That's a big issue that they definitely look at. Some of the interesting things that I thought was very intriguing that they would accept anymore is has not used marijuana regularly within the past 5 years, or occasionally within the past 3 years, or not used other controlled substances. This I find to be a little bit disturbing for police officers just because of the fact that you would think that they would be law-abiding. However, as we have surrounding states, like I was sharing, Idaho is not a state that typically supports the use of marijuana. It is illegal to use marijuana in the state of Idaho. However, touching states like Washington and Oregon, Colorado, some of those other areas, they have legalized recreational use of marijuana in those states. So things might be a little bit different state by state, obviously. Another interesting area, have no more than 2 misdemeanor convictions or DUI convictions within the past 5 years, and no felony convictions. Have been fingerprinted. I shared with you before, I worked corrections for 5 years, and that was a very intense process between the fingerprinting. When I did it, I also had to go through a background check. I was working with juveniles, and then I also had to go through and take a lie detector test. And a lot of states really don't hold those very valuable anymore, but that was part of the process I had to go through. And obviously, another big important thing is that you have a valid driver's license, obviously from the state in which you are a police officer. And a big part here is also a good driving record. Big issue that I see with some of these, last time in class I showed you a video about a police officer that was busted selling cocaine in uniform out of his squad car on duty. So when you think about police officers, it's really important. Like I said, it all goes back to the culture of the organization in which the officer's working in. And so we have to set these precedents really, really high for these officers coming in. The expectations need to be really clear, training needs to be specific, and then those morals and ethical. You know, we went around the classroom and I asked you to give me one word that would really define what ethics is, and everybody kind of had a little bit of a different take. There was a few repeats as we went through the class, but really understanding and making sure that we have everything we need in the qualified candidates coming in. However, the big issue the United States is facing across every single state is the fact that we have not enough people wanting to become police officers. I shared with you, we'll talk a little bit about women in policing towards the end of the class. And when you start thinking about women in policing, there's only about 12% of police that are women in the United States. I shared that number with you before. And so being able to do that job, so say for example, pregnancy plays a huge role in a female officer's job, because obviously you're not going to want someone who's 9 months pregnant in a squad car in hostile situations trying to resolve issues where she could be shot, she could be hit by a car, she could be slugged or hurt. There's all kinds of different things that officers have to face out in the field. And so that's one of the other reasons why there's not very many women police officers out in the force. As you go through here, I just thought some of the other things, if you get a chance to go out there and look at this site a little bit better, it talks about Idaho State Police, very limited number of those. There's a few different requirements here. Meets the Idaho State Police drug policy. So obviously that's probably going to be a little bit different than what you saw for your basic officer that's working for Boise Police Department or the Meridian Police Department. Same requirements. Obviously you're going to need to be a U.S. citizen. Educational requirements are not that much higher. There's post-academy, ISP training departments and planning, grants, research. There's all kinds of different areas. As I mentioned earlier, I did juvenile corrections, and so you'll see here's that polygraph evaluation. I also had to go through an oral interview, and I also had to have an extensive background examination conducted to make sure that there was nothing in my past that could affect my ability to make good, ethical, sound decisions. Having two or more years of work experience, so a lot of the times smaller or rural areas or people that are tired with the basic beat and want to be out on the road a little bit more like to apply for the Idaho State Patrol, because it's definitely stepping up in policing. Again, they're requiring that you have a valid driver's license, and this is the big one. I had shared with you that I tested, oh my goodness, clear back in 1993 when I graduated with my first degree. It was in criminal justice, and I thought, wow, maybe I do want to become a police officer. Washington State Police Department was hiring, and I was interested, and so I went out to test for it. But the big thing is now what they're starting to do is start testing differently men versus women, because obviously women don't have that same physical strength and requirements that a man does. Not to say that a woman can't do the job just as well, and a man vice versa, but those are some of the things that police departments are starting to now embrace and think about before they start discriminating against, selecting more male candidates than female candidates. Down here, another little start area that I thought some of you might like to see. 2 years of attendance at an accredited college or university may be substituted for work experience. And so this is when those criminal justice degrees come in. There's other types of training that you can get as well. But if you're interested in it, criminal justice can be a very intriguing field to go into. There's more information here. I'm not going to go any deeper on this site, but I just wanted to make sure to share a little bit of this information with you. So you know some of the requirements. If you go out to Colorado or Washington, they may have a few different requirements that maybe Idaho doesn't require and vice versa. So let me get back over to the PowerPoint here and we'll get that started back up again. On this slide here that I've got showing, I just went into the Boise Police Department's main webpage, and I just wanted to share some of the numbers with you as well. I get fascinated by numbers. When I start thinking about, there's over 400 employees that work for the Boise Police Department. That's quite a few, but if you start thinking about population a little bit later on into the lecture, I'll bring up some graphs and charts depending on how far we get. If not, I'll pick up with that next week when I start doing lecture. 82 civilian support staff, which means we've got 302 sworn officers working just in the Boise Police Department. That doesn't encompass Meridian, it doesn't encompass surrounding smaller territories. So that's quite a few people working to make sure that Boise is kept safe. Another big thing I thought you might be interested is that the annual budget for the Boise Police Department runs around $49 million. Now that's a lot of money to be able to distribute. However, on average, I was looking at some of the numbers and starting salaries for police officers, and they can run anywhere between $48,000 and $52,000 up to $55,000 a year. That's not inclusive of the benefits that come along with being a Boise Police Department or a state employee. There's all kinds of retirement packages. So it's a really good living to have. The one thing you have to keep in mind, though, is if you do become a police officer, you have to realize that you are either working morning shifts, afternoon shifts, or graveyard shifts. And I shared with you, a lot of my friends like to work the graveyard shift. Yes, it's physically hard on you if you can't adapt very well to that environment. But sometimes it can be a very exciting time to go out there and experience it. So circling back around real quick, I just want to make sure I did put the announcement out for the ride-along. So those of you that are interested in doing a ride-along, you're going to need to get that form that I've attached in the announcement section, print it off, read it very carefully. Make sure that you fill everything out that it's asking for. It's going to ask you for driver's license number. It's going to ask you all kinds of questions. Make sure not to miss any spots, because if you do, the application comes back to me again after I take it to them and they go, fix this. And so I have to go back in and have you redo things. So the quicker we get those into the Boise Police Department, the faster you'll be able to get out there, hopefully on your ride-alongs with the Boise PD. Some of the different members here at the Boise Police Department, I wanted to share the mission with you. I've mentioned these words before. We're here to protect, we're here to serve, and lead our community to a safer tomorrow. Thank you, Boise. We love living and working here. And this comes directly from their main website. So I'm going to click on this next link here, and we're going to go out and we're going to look at that web link that I was just talking about the main Boise site for police officers. Let me go ahead and copy this here real quick. Get over here. All right, give me just 1 second. New share. Getting closer. All right, let me get this main screen up here. All right, so everyone should be able to see this screen. This is the main website for the City of Boise Police Department. There's all kinds of different information that you can find on here. The police chief is very good about going out and posting messages. a lot of the main websites, Meridian Police Department, they're all going to have similar setups. This is a way for them to try to reach out through community through the internet sources as well. Along here, there's all kinds of different links that you can go out to and investigate, crime stats and maps. So if you ever have to do a research paper on something you're interested in that's crime related to the city of Boise or whatnot, you can go out there and find that information. There's all kinds of different information here about how to become a Citizen Police Academy officer. They're always trying to recruit civilians also to be assistants along the green belt and other areas to make sure to accommodate and make sure that we live in a safe community. Here's some of the information that I pulled in the PowerPoint that I just discussed a few minutes ago. And this is the slide that I'm going to have you watch now. It's about 5 minutes long in length, but it talks a little bit about the engagement. I shared before last time in class about how officers get out, they walk the beat when the weather's good, they try to engage with people. Most of you, those of you that are familiar with Idaho, here in Boise, you see a lot of motorcycle cops, especially during the warmer part of the year. Probably not right now, but there are still a few of them running around out there. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and get this link up, and I'm going to go ahead and play it, and then I'll come back on here in just a few minutes.
Community like Boise does. We can walk down the street in our uniform and people are shaking our hands, telling us thank you for the job that we do. They understand the importance of our position as police officers, and they also understand the hardships that we can have just by having a uniform on. I'm very well, thank you.
Patrol is where it's at. You get to meet people firsthand. You don't come in the aftermath. You're right in the thick of things as it's going down. And so I really like that excitement. I also like the fact that we're able to stop and chat with the people. We're a very community policing organization. If you ever needed us, you can call us, right? I became a police officer because I grew up in the inner city where police officers were not called for crime. And that's one thing that I wanted to do. I wanted to help make that change. When people see officers, that they feel that the officers will be there for them.
So we got a call for a potential prowler in a residence. Woman came home to find that someone was parked in her driveway. She hit the button for her garage, and her garage only opened up part way, and it just stopped working. So she obviously got concerned, so she called the police. Just about to call a canine out and hail the subject out of the house, and it turned out that the neighbor's brother had just parked in the wrong driveway. The woman who called wanted us to clear the house and make sure no one was inside, so we did that for her. And she was happy, and we helped her fix her garage door. So now her garage door is working, and she's home, and she's safe, and she's happy.
When people need help, they call 911, and patrol are the people that show up. They're the blue suits at the door who have come to try to do their best to rectify or to solve the problems.
Policing is part of the community. The community is part of the policing organization. And you have to recognize that it's a team. And you consider a city of over 200,000 people and the relationship between the citizens and the police department, that relationship doesn't happen by chance. It happens by a willingness to work together, to get to know each other.
Anyway, I'm just cruising up the Idaho side now. I don't want to set up on that side. My heart's always been in patrol. You work as a team. It's not just you by yourself, just fixing problems and addressing problems. It's you and 5 or 6 other people working at one common goal, providing safety and security out here for the residents of the city. What's your name, bud?
The service that patrol provides actually is the security in your homes to make sure people feel safe in their homes. And then when we do have incidents where there's crimes that occur, our job is to investigate those crimes and bring the people forward that are responsible for those crimes.
The patrol division is normally where individuals start when they enter a policing organization. We get often the youngest and most dynamic officers, and we mix them with some of the most experienced and well-rounded officers. When you put those elements together on the street, and it's a fantastic group of individuals that we feel very confident can handle virtually any incident that comes their way. We recognize that when you are in the patrol division of the Boise Police Department, everybody calls you. Doesn't matter if it's the fire department, if it's the paramedics, or if it's the power company. You come, you help, you serve, and when they leave and go on back to their business, you stay and make sure everything is cleaned up and ready to be turned back over to the city.
Have you been arrested for driving without privileges?
The individuals who work in the division often look at their time here as the very, very best of their career.
It is always fun. You work with some of the best people in the world, and that's really the key. They want to make a difference.
I know many officers can speak of, even people they've dealt with in a negative manner who've come back in the future and told them, hey, what a positive impact it's had on my life. I think that's the greatest reward for us, honestly, is the impact that we can have with the citizens.
Foresee 2655, good one.
We all basically are out here for one common goal, is keeping the city safe, and it's a fun experience. It's a unique place to do police work in Boise, Idaho.
I would suggest the Boise City Police Department and the citizens of Boise make a great team, and together it makes patrol a great place to work.
Being raised in a law enforcement family, I honestly did not know of any other position that I wanted to do. I got to go on ride-alongs with my dad, and I got to see the impact that he made on people's lives, and I wanted to do that. I wanted to help people out to the best of my ability, and this position as a patrol officer allowed me to do that.
To know that you have done something good for someone, and sometimes good is helping someone find their bike or a stolen item, but it can also be taking someone to jail that has harmed someone. See, now you guys know what we go through, right? And just knowing that you were able to get back is fulfilling.
All right, as you can see, they're very dedicated to what it is that they do and what they give back to community. And those street patrols have a lot of influence on how people perceive officers in the community. You know, just common engagement, sharing a friendly smile, and just making sure that people know that they're readily available and there to assist if anyone was to need something. As we jump in here, you know, earlier today I mentioned a little bit about internal affairs in Boise and some of the things that they do. So say, for example, sometimes, you know, I talked a little bit about excessive force last time in class, and how many times, you know, social media, somebody grabs their cell phone and records like the last 20 seconds of something happening that's making the officer look like it's in a bad light. Well, I've got a couple more links here that we'll go in and we'll look at some different areas, and so how you can go in and file a complaint. I'm not going to click into that one. I'm going to go ahead and go directly into this one. It's connected to the internal affairs, so we should probably be able to see both. So let me grab this one here real quick, and we'll go out to this link and look at it. Some of the important stuff that I want to point out to you about how they're trying to be able to promote a better or more positive environment out there to gain the trust back of the citizens. And all right, almost there. Hope everybody had a good day so far. All right, so again, this is that main screen that I was on just a few minutes ago that I shared the video from. It's got a little bit different of a setup along here. Again, you're going to see the DUI, drug resources, traffic enforcement, and whatnot. But the Internal Affairs Department, really important. They play a large role of doing investigation into complaints filed maybe by citizens, filed internally by other police officers. This is where I'll go in and pull up some of the different charts so we can look at that. You know, there's a lot of internal and external things that happen in police departments, and so making sure that there's a balance between both of those is going to be extremely important. You know, some of the variables here, the mission of the Office of Internal Affairs is to protect the public, the employee, and the department through a fair and proactive investigation of alleged misconduct. This mission is intended to accomplish 3 different objectives. The very first one would be to use it for the protection of the public, you know, identifying elements of corrective action that need to happen. You know, officers are only human just like you and I are. There's nothing that sets them apart from us. When the officer comes into class, he's going to tell you that he has to put himself on a much higher plane, and it takes him time to come down from that higher element. And what's interesting is, you know, he's been on the force for so long, that he's like, sometimes I come home and if I've had a really bad day, it takes me a little bit of time to bring myself back. And my family just knows to stay away from me when I'm in those kind of moods. So it's important to understand that officers are put at a very high adrenaline risk all the time. They're there, first of all, like I said, to protect the public, protection of the department. The videos that I showed you last time in class, one bad cop can ruin the image of a whole entire department that's done good for years and years and years. So that's one of the important things that the Internal Affairs also takes care of. And then protection of the employees. As I shared in class last time, being able to use body cams is an extremely important part of being able to protect their officers. Not every police department has the resources readily available for them to be able to capitalize on using these to protect these officers. Sometimes, if they're not trained properly, they can do more harm than good. So the only important thing I want to point out here on this one is, you know, it helps protect those officers against false or malicious allegations. I've got more videos I'll share a little bit later on in some other lectures, and you'll understand why it's really important to have a backup. You know, your partner could be corrupt just like you. You could be taking money. You could be taking bribes. But Internal Affairs does a pretty good job of investigating the situation. Down here, the police department, Boise Police Department, does a really good job of telling you what happens when you file a complaint. You know, if you're angry at an officer, maybe he pulled you over wrongly 3 different times in the same subdivision for speeding, but he never issued you a ticket. I shared with you the story about my daughter, how they came out to investigate a break-in at my mom's home, and then the officer started calling my daughter. He'd taken her contact information off police reports. So that's when someone would want to go out and file a complaint against the police department. What do the findings of the investigation mean? I'm going to pull up one of the PDFs. You'll see down below here, the police department does a pretty good job of being able to provide quite a few years of complaints. They're not really in depth what I'm going to show you next. I'm going to just click into the 2015 report. So this is some of the findings and some of the questions. I'm just going to point out the highlights as we get going. If you have time and want to go back and read over this, it can really help you in the future. A lot of you may have always had positive experiences with police officers. Maybe there's been that time when you've had that negative experience with them, hopefully more positive than negative. But this is information that will serve your best interests for the rest of your life. So understanding how police departments work in general and how the Internal Affairs Office works to investigate complaints. I'm going to go ahead and open this link up here, and we'll go in. This is just a PDF that I'm going to pull up next. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the numbers in here. Hopefully you'll be able to see the screen well enough. So this is a report that's put out at the end of the year. It runs from January 1st, as you see here, through December of the year end, so annual statistical report. So they've compiled this rather nicely. It's only 11 pages long, which isn't much. So again, there's a lot of charts and different information in here. If you go through and read some of the details, like I said, I'll point out some of the important things I want you to notice on this. So when we get in here, let's see, get to the right section. So complaints talks a little bit about different levels of citizens' complaints. So this is what I want you to understand right here. The upper stuff you can read a little bit later on, but citizens' complaints are classified in one of 2 categories. Class 2 complaints include allegations of inadequate service, discourtesy, minor performance issues, improper procedures, and other less serious and non-criminal conduct. So maybe what the police officer was doing, the younger one that started calling my daughter, maybe that would be classified as a Class 2 complaint. Class 1 complaints are a little bit more serious. You've heard me mention this term before in class, you know, the term excessive force or violations of criminal law, breach of your own civil rights. You know, are you being harassed day in and day out? One of the big things we'll talk about in some of the reading that will be coming in weeks to come, and some of the videos I'll have you watch on your own time, are talking about, you know, how Muslims are treated. After 9/11, you know, the police officers, regardless of race, color, creed, male, female, whatever it might be, they stereotyped against a particular class. And when we get into Homeland Securities, we'll talk about that as well. I don't know how many of you have flown lately, but if you are in some of the larger airports, certain ethnic groups tend to get pulled over and screened a lot more closely than the typical white person going through a screening. So it's important to pay attention to some of these different areas when I show you some of these charts. So your class 2 are the less serious, your class 1s are more serious. There's some different information here as well. Some of these things that are initiated in these charts that I'm going to show you are also department-initiated complaints. This is initiated by Boise Police Department supervisors or brought to supervisory attention by any of its employees. So that's another classification you'll see here in just a few minutes. I'm almost down to some of the charts that we'll talk about here. So let me see here. So you'll see some of the increases. I really like how they've gone through and portrayed how, you know, number of citizens complaints, the less serious complaints down along here. You've seen that obviously Boise Police Department is doing something right if you follow along here and look at how their numbers have declined. 2012 was a year when they had quite a few different complaints. 2011, really high as well. 2014 looks like it was a pretty good year in general. Departmental initiated complaints, you know, you've got the class 1 and class 2 again. Last time in class, I mentioned the ombudsman referral. So say, for example, if a citizen or the person that's filed the complaint doesn't feel that Internal Affairs has given a fair shake of the complaint, whether it be level 1 or level 2, internal or external, they can go to the ombudsman for more follow-up or more investigation into it, which is an outside source that does investigations into wrongdoings in the police department. As you get going down a little bit further, there's some pretty neat charts in here. Number of department-initiated complaints. I thought that was really interesting. If you look at this green line, there wasn't very many that were initiated internally in the department. Then all of a sudden there was this huge spike, almost over 100% increase, easily. 143 is what that number is of department-initiated complaints. Looks like the number of citizen complaints, however, has definitely gone on a lower plane, and you're going to see there's only been 64 in the entire year for 2015. Those are some pretty impressive numbers. And before I had mentioned, you know, all they have now is a part-time ombudsman for the Boise area. And you'll see that all of 2015, that part-time person only had to deal with 2 complaints that were elevated to higher levels. So that is a very impressive report considering the number of people that are serviced here in the Boise area. Some of the numbers, you know, if you're wondering, you know, earlier I showed you there's 302, I believe, sworn police officers for the Boise area. The population that those 302 police officers and 88 or 87 civilian-oriented people that work for the Boise PD, they service this number of population. So 223,670 people do they service in this community. And as you all know, those of you that are from Idaho or are familiar with Boise, that number continues to grow. A $49 million budget, you would think that that would stretch quite a ways, but when I start talking about salary, resources, that's everything lumped into one sum. So that's equipment, that is cars, that is gear, that is guns, that is body armor, absolutely everything that would be needed by a police officer to be able to do their job successfully. Citizens' complaints, 62 out of a huge population here. So that says a lot about the Boise Police Department. And, you know, I'm pretty sure if I was to pull your Meridian, Nampa, Caldwell, a lot of these numbers would probably be very similar. So if a student's looking for an awesome research paper to do on one of the topics along the way that you get to choose, you might want to go out and do a comparative analysis on different police departments and how maybe other departments are handling situations different. Just throwing that out there, just one of many topics that you could write about in this course. Number of service calls. Again, total calls for service, there was 148,347 within 1 year's time. That's a lot of out in the vehicle, out in the community, engaging with community, and the total number of complaints that police department faced was only 62. Now, these are some pretty amazing numbers. I'd be interested to see what New York has. I can't even imagine how many complaints they take on a yearly basis. I believe the last I had seen is they have over 1,200 police officers that just serve for New York in general. Those are some old numbers. I'd have to go back and get you some more current ones. If you're interested, let me know and I can look that up for you. If you want to do some research on it, I really encourage you to go out there and look at some of these things, because it's going to help you understand a little bit more about why officers have to have such a high level of ethics and trust and do the right thing and have their good show on all the time. Not always are officers going to be on the best behavior. They're going to have bad days just like you or I. So making sure that when they get out in the face of the community, they are really putting on the best efforts they possibly can. I think we're almost to the end of some of the charts I wanted to show you. Let's see, use of force. These are some other citizens' complaints along the way. They've categorized them. Citizen 2, the class 2, which is the more, not really the more severe. Class 1 is the most severe in terms of complaints. Unbecoming conduct, 3. Department-initiated complaints, 4. Demeanor, so this again, very, very minimal considering how many calls they go on, 14 out of 148,000 calls during 2015. Driving violations, well, obviously sometimes officers have to get somewhere fast and they're going to cut someone off, they're going to push you over to the side of the road, whatever it takes to be able to get out there and to help those people that are in need. Duty performed, this is where most of the category gets hit most of the time, but the big thing is you'll notice it's not initiated by outside citizens. It's initiated internally by other police officers. So officers are holding each other accountable for a professional performance. And, maybe that's a good thing to see that number of complaints coming up. Not all of those are founded or grounded, and we'll talk about that here in just a few minutes. There's another chart that I'll show you. I just really think that showing you these numbers will really make you understand how much police departments really do for our communities and help you get a better appreciation for what our police department does. No matter where you live or what state you're from or what country you're from, they try to do the best possible to be able to take care of you because citizens are their number one concern and your safety. Some of the allegations and findings, like I was mentioning earlier, let me scroll down here, another chart I wanted to show you. All right, so a lot of these are unfounded, sustained, very few, very minimal, not sustained, exonerated. There's a huge number that there's nothing that's happened to them. Citizens 2 complaints, the more serious of those, 20 were unfounded out of the 50. 4, there was no findings. 9 were exonerated. Only about 9 out of the 50 sustained, and people were held accountable for those. This number was really interesting to me here, though. 80 out of the 90 initiated were sustained. So that means there was 80 individuals that were held accountable for their performance that was unacceptable. And that's a good thing to see, because if I had 80 down here in the no findings or unfounded or exonerated, I'd be a little bit concerned about the culture and the ethics within a police department. I just want you guys to understand how these numbers roll out, because when you look at these, it's kind of overwhelming, all the different charts. Sustained findings, this site breaks it down just a little bit more, but that's what I wanted to point out to you. And this is just focusing on the Boise Police Department. Like I said, there's so much information out there readily available for you to be able to investigate. Use of force, that's one of the biggest complaint areas most police departments face. All right, we're going to jump back over here to internal affairs a little bit more. Some of the policies and procedures within an agency is very, very essential. As I was just talking, those 80 out of the 90 that were held accountable, if misconduct occurs, That agency has measures in place to investigate and address such behaviors. And obviously the Internal Affairs Department did a very, very good job, because only 2, and it doesn't say which 2, were elevated to the ombudsman to do additional investigation. That is phenomenal for the Boise Police Department. Let's see here. Some of the important things when we're hiring, I've got some more charts I'll show you here in just a few minutes. Obviously, if law enforcement executes and hires the appropriate staff, making sure that they've done the background checks. If it's requiring a polygraph, like I said, every state has different requirements to become a police officer. You'll see some consistencies, but then you'll also see other requirements as well. Deliver ethics training. That's another big thing that police departments are starting to do, is deliver more understanding about what ethics truly is. Establishing an early intervention system. So I'm going to have that rookie cop riding with a seasoned cop for almost anywhere between 48 months, maybe more, maybe a year and a half. I'll have that seasoned cop with an unseasoned cop to make sure that they're trained the right way. With an early intervention system, if I have someone that's not following the rules, that's not doing, the safety steps that are required to be a police officer, I need to step in early here with an intervention tool to make sure that I go, okay, Charlie, in my office, we're going to talk about what it takes. If we've got an active shooter situation, which you'll get to hear a presentation on that from the officer I have coming in, you've really got to wrap your head around that. Why do I want to make sure that I tell you what's right? I don't want a dead officer. I don't want to be justifying to my higher-ups why this rookie officer got shot or lost his life because I didn't have the proper training in place for my people. As a police captain or chief, it's very, very important that you hold your workers accountable, especially out in the field and when they're in the building. Next area, the internal affairs process may be necessary only in rare instances. And you saw the total number of calls that they have to take in, but the Internal Affairs Department only gets involved in such small numbers of those situations. All right, this is another chart that I wanted to share with you, cycle of community trust building. This is very, very important because it's a complete circle. It goes round and round and round and round. And where this true cycle starts is, recruiting and hiring, making sure that we're getting out there to job fairs, making sure that we're out there with our best face on, and we're going through and we're investigating and we're doing background checks and we're making sure that we know who we're hiring. Like I shared with you in class last time, I told you about someone that was one of the officers that took in a DUI victim, took advantage of her while she was at the police station. So when you think about ethics, it has to be from the very beginning, before that officer's trained, before that officer goes through post or academy, before any of that happens, you've got to make sure you've got the right fit for the position. Ethics training and education, it's not a one-stop shop. This has to be an ongoing and continuous process in place to make sure officers know what the expectations are. Constantly, our world is a changing place and demographics change and we have new people move to the area, so being able to figure out how to engage with new cultures is also critical for officers here in the area. Boise continues to have more and more numbers of refugees coming here and residing in Boise. And so being able to deal with that demographic, like I was sharing last time in class, if we went down to the hood and we sent some middle class or ritzy police officer down there to cover a shift, he's not going to know how to deal with his territory. He's not going to know the signs to look for in a problem situation. Early intervention, like I was saying, I'm going to jump in there. If I see something wrong going on, I expect my officers to keep each other in line. It's part of the ethics process. Building capacity and sustainability. Are my officers okay? If I have 10 officers respond and 2 of their partners get shot and killed, do I have follow-up training? Do I have a plan in place? What happens if that shootout, I lost 2 officers, but maybe two of the victims or two of the people that were engaged in the process were killed in that time, and somebody clipped it on a social media clip, and they only saw the officers taking them down and shooting them. Well, internal affairs may have to step into that. I may have officers on leave. I may have all these different dynamics going on, but the internal affairs is the one that steps up and really takes control of that whole situation. So as a captain, that makes me feel a little more secure, but I'd still want to be a little more engaged with that community effort to make sure that we pull the community trust back into it. We've seen what happens when we don't have community trust. You've seen the riots. Whether there's peaceful demonstrations or crazy riots that break out, it happens. You know, recently there was the little, he was a Caucasian young male that had some learning disabilities, and there was 4 African Americans that took him and made him drink toilet water and did all these horrible things to him and tortured him and tied him up, and you know, absolutely there was not a voice for that young man. However, if a Black African American gets shot because he's not listening to officer commands and they only get the last 30 seconds on a video cam, or a civilian videos it and then slamming him to the ground, well, that tells a complete different story. And so next week we'll talk a little bit about social media and some of the harm it can do, but I'm also going to tell you about the positive that social media can do for police departments. And then again, you know, you move into community trust, response, support, because if you have a good police department, you're going to have community trust and support. They're going to back you when you need their assistance. And then effective policing, making sure that what needs to happen gets carried out. That all results in a safe community. You know, whether it's through engagement of, you know, neighborhood watch or allowing citizens, you know, a lot of police departments are underfunded, they're understaffed, and so they're having to reach out to community volunteers. And there's another class lecture that I'll talk to you a little bit about the importance of volunteering and giving back to community. You know, they go out and they'll train these civilians to work the green belt, or they'll teach them to work events to make sure that officers are still doing their job, but there's citizens that are actively engaged. I've got another video I'll show you later, and I love videos, obviously. You guys know that by this point. But I just want you to know the importance of what officers do. And if you can wrap your head around the importance of the ethics that comes into this, it kind of brings the whole philosophy of this UF 200 course to light, because that's what it's all about, is understanding, community engagement, giving back. And the way this class is spun is how officers give back to community and how we as citizens can give back to community as well. It's a partnership. And when you've got a strong partnership in community, you have low crime rates, those statistics continue to fall, neighborhoods are safe, schools are safe, our kids are safe, our families are safe. And that makes a big difference in making sure that everything's taken care of within a community. In here, you know, creating culture of integrity. It's critical to building and sustaining community trust, effective policing and safe communities. It spells out defined standards, actions that the members of the department have to uphold. You know, I really appreciate the fact that, you know, when an officer gets a DUI, they're held accountable for it. There's been some police departments locally here, I won't throw names out just because I try to respect every police department locally in the Treasure Valley, but there's some that have put them on administrative leave, or they put them at desk duty, and they've still been able to maintain their job. And sometimes, just personally and ethically myself, I'm like, you know, this is the person I trust with my life to keep drunks and people that are drinking out on the streets off the road. And I'm sure many of you probably feel the same way. Not that officers can't be rehabilitated, but do you really want to risk the reputation of your department because of one bad egg going out there getting a DUI? Judges, you know, sometimes they're held to a very high principle. You see the same thing. Judges go out there, get consecutive DUIs, our congressmen, other people. But most of the time their feet are put to the fire and they're held accountable for their actions, which means, you know, the internal affairs department is doing a pretty darn good job in our area. You know, accountability and values, community trust must be built on the foundation of a strong police culture. There's got to be values within their integrity. Individuals have to be held accountable for their behaviors, for their actions out in the community. I don't care if they're in uniform or they're off duty. They always have that persona in the community, and most of them do an amazing job at upholding their personal life and their professional life as police officers. This culture also must be modeled by the administration. Like I was saying, what is taught, what the culture becomes, is what becomes the organizational stature by what they function. No two police departments are the same. It comes from the captain and the expectations that are spelled out between squad leaders or whoever it is that's in charge of shifts. It comes right down to that person taking accountability for the performance of their officers. When all these elements are in place, the culture of integrity is very transparent with the community. And overall, the most important thing is to help build a trusting relationship between the department and the community in which is engaging with one another. There's a couple other things that I'll go through here real quick. My video is probably going to shut off here. I've got about 4 minutes left. So effective tool building for building trust, you know, some of the internal strategies that they can use. Comprehensive recruiting, you know, that circle that I showed you about how it just goes round and round and round, making sure you've got the right person in the right place. Service orientation. Continuous training. Like I said, it's not a one-stop shop. Conducting consistent evaluations. That's one thing that you didn't see on that circle. That is absolutely critical. I did talk a little bit about negative behavior. Didn't mention much about positive behavior. I'm not sure about the reward systems for officers doing well, but I'm pretty sure that their captain recognizes them and gives them credit where credit is due. Using some source of early intervention system, not only in internal affairs, but in present behavior that may lead to internal affairs. So if you have an officer that maybe is about ready to cross the line, or he's kind of going back and forth and he's done it a few times, or she's done it a few times, that's when some new training needs to be rolled out. Maybe that officer just doesn't quite know how to handle certain situations, and maybe just a simple refresher or a simple hour-long course and what to do in these situations might really turn things around and make him or her make the correct decision when dealing with the community. Some external strategies, you know, developing citizen police academies. We'll talk a little bit more about these when we get into volunteering with community police officers. Institute some form of community-oriented policing program to better engage in the community. I think last time in class I mentioned a little bit about how SROs are in most of the schools, but funding's starting to get cut and they can't afford to have them there. It all comes out of that $49 million budget, and that's just the few local schools in the Boise School District. So thinking about how money can best be spent, you know what, I'd sure want an SRO at my kid's school. I know they used to have one, but now they don't, and I think it's a real loss. Well, they still have one, but he's only part-time, but I really would feel a lot safer if there was an officer there at all times protecting my kids. Holding workshops on subjects of interest to the community, being out there at community events and engaging positively with them, even if it's at job fairs. Goodness, the outreach that goes into community is so very important for success. Conducting community surveys to gauge and enhance the public's perspective. Anonymous surveys, maybe of people that have filed complaints, or maybe randomly taking service calls, you know, and going out and following up and making sure everything was okay. What could we do better? What can we do better to serve you? And then proactively involving the public in different situations. I've got a few more slides here. I'm afraid it's about ready to cut off. So I'm going to go ahead and end this session. I'll pick up, so we only have 2 more slides in this, so I'll pick up with this next week. Again, I apologize to you guys for missing class today. I couldn't get it linked. So Zoom is an amazing source when technology is working. I hope you all have a great weekend and enjoyed the video and presentation today. If you have questions, I'm available. Text me, call me, email me, and I will get back to you. So have a great weekend. Make sure to get in there and get your short answer posted. I did put an example out there for you, and I will see you all next week on Tuesday. Thank you for everything, class. I appreciate all of you. Have a good one. Bye-bye.